Welcome, welcome. And today happens to be Holocaust Remembrance Day. And so we're going to dedicate this lesson, as challenging as it's going to be, uh, in memory of the attempt to destroy our people and the Torah that goes along with it. And to know that here we are studying Torah and that somehow we are able to survive. And given the current rise in anti-Semitism, certainly seems to come in waves. I pray that the Torah and Hashem God will be triumphant, despite human lack of appreciation of all the blessings that come from an ultimate source. All right. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
Okay.
Thank you. We are going back. And that's because I realized that the time before last, when we did this passage quite a few years ago, as it happens to be, we had ended at this particular point. And so we had started discussing at this point leprosy in houses, but I wanted to be a little bit more rigorous. In fact, we may have actually, I'm trying to think. Yeah. Trying to see where we were. Yeah, could be. What happens and how the priest came to diagnose the situation. And here we're talking about the fact that if they, it's starting here. Okay. I just want you to see, I'm just going back all the way to show you where this whole subject begins. It's quite lengthy. So it could be that this is where we actually ended here, and I'm not going to do the Rashis. We did Rashis, but not necessarily did all the text that went in between the Rashis. So here we go. So let me make sure where this starts off, because it's already verse 30. Yeah, right. So it looked like it's okay. So this is where it starts, and this is already on verse 33, right, of chapter 14. And this is where the whole subject of the leprosy of houses starts. So in terms of a reference, verse 33 is where it starts. And it says, Ki tavo el Canaan. In other words, the whole, even if you saw these symptoms elsewhere, they wouldn't count. It's only once you get to the land of Canaan, right? So that's, and it says, Vanatati nega Tzara-at, I shall place, and in the case where I place a plague of leprosy, right, on a house, on a house, on the house of the land of your possession. So uh, I didn't mention this yesterday, but the rabbis discuss this particular thing, and of course, homes might have been a little bit, well, the average home might have been a little bit simpler than they are nowadays, at least in our society. But still, I mean, having to ultimately destroy a house is a pretty significant thing. And the rabbis tried to explain this in a very sweet way, in that they said that, well, what happened was that when the Israelites entered the land of Canaan, the Canaanites hid treasures inside in secret places inside their homes. And that when the Israelites wound up, that in fact, this particular plague may have been a blessing in disguise. And that as a result, I'm sure you're already connecting all the dots, but essentially that when the Israelites wound up having to destroy the house, they found these treasures that were there. From a sort of spiritual point of view, of course, there's the other lessons that can be determined in the idea that sometimes in destroying something that we hold on to very much, we sometimes discover actually more valuable elements within our lives, certainly from a spiritual point of view. So just I wanted to cover that because it is an interesting interpretation, because generally we would look at leprosy as being a form of punishment. Again, I don't love the word punishment. Consequence is a word that I prefer, as some of you already know. But regardless, it's interesting. So here we are starting with this, right? And it's basically saying that somebody who has this, he has to tell the priest. So we know, and I mentioned this yesterday, that the role of the priest in between the person and the divine is significant. That's basically the role of a priest, is to act as in a sense, an intermediary, to devote his life in a way that he can serve as an intermediary between a layperson and heaven, right? And he says, Kenega, it looks to me like there's a certain plague in the house, right? So here we go. So it says the priest has to command to clear out pinu et abayit, but before Hakon wrote it. So interesting, right? That he tells to clear out everything that's in the house before he arrives. And again, it's the point that's interesting here is that as long as the stuff is taken out of the house and before the priest makes the diagnosis, right, that stuff is okay. But if that stuff were in the house and then the priest made the diagnosis, then that stuff would be impure. So there's clearly, right, a distinction being made between what we could say is sort of factually, the actual given case there, as opposed to how the priest diagnoses it. And just that there's how people view reality. I mean, this is an amazing and wonderful proof that facts may be facts, but how we interpret facts, that's reality. And if you look at human behavior, you realize this, that people believe that that Jews have radar coming out of the sky to view people. If they believe that, you can't force them to disbelieve them. And I love there's a saying that says, my mind's made up. Please don't confuse me with the facts. Right? I mean, it's just such an important element of human nature, right? So here so the priest is absolutely observing this plague, right? The hine hanega, the kirot habayit, it's in the walls of the house, right? And he describes here, right, that the shka arurot, cavities, depressions, yarak rakot, which means sort of moldy, green, yarok is green, or adam damot, or red. And we know that mold, I believe we can also see mold as red as well, right? And it looks like they're lower, they're into the wall itself, right? So again, the priest has to go into the house, he comes out of the house, he locks up the house, right? Puts it in quarantine for 7 days, right? And then it talks, remember, we were talking about the priest has to go and come, right? The priest has to come back on the seventh day, he has to see, and if he observes he sees that this particular affliction, this particular plague, has actually it's gotten further on, right? It's spread in the walls of the house, right? So at that point, it says the priest shall command to remove the stones which contain this particular situation, right? This plague, they shall send these stones, cast these stones el michutz ha'ir, outside of the city, to a makom tamei, to an impure place, a place that's sort of designated as a place of impurity, right? And then they have to scrape yatzia mibayit v'saviv. They have to take the area that was removed, and they have to scrape away v'shavchu et ha'afar asher yikzu, and they have to take the earth that they've scraped away, again, take it outside the city to a place that is impure, and then they take lachu avainin acherut. They should take other stones that he will tachtabanim, and they should place them in the place of those stones and the earth which they had taken, and the tachet habayit, they plaster the house, right? And then it says the second time, if this plague returns, ufarach, and it grows again in the house, right, on this house, after the stones were moved, right, and after the house was that these things were removed and it was replastered, etc., and the priest has to come again, right? Avara, and he sees how it spread, right? And it says it's malignant Tzara-at, right? And the house is now determined that it's impure, right? And now, you have to totally demolish the house It stones for it. It's your etzav, excuse me, and then the wood that's in it, that kol afar habayit, and any of the earth that's in the house that was used. Well, again, it's got to be taken outside the city to this impure place. Okay, we're dealing now, I think, with areas of, but I wanted to go over the text itself. V'haba el habayit, and someone who comes into the house, kol yamehi skirato, all the days that it's in quarantine. Yitma ad ha'erev. So remember, we discussed the level of impurity. We went into quite a bit of detail, Rashi, from Sifra to determine how this exactly works, because here it simply says he is impure until nightfall, right? And now it goes on. Remember, we did this verse, one who lies down in the house. So not only is impure, but his clothing has to be washed as well. The one who eats in this house while it's in this state of quarantine, it also says we shall wash his clothes. So we did this, right? We looked at this yesterday. The imbo yavo hakohen, right? But on the other hand, if the priest in fact shows up, and he checks it out, he's got to check it out a second time. It's all the way back to that after that first week, right? I assume this is what we're talking about, right? And we're talking about out that first week. But he no lo fasa, and he sees that the anaga, that it hasn't actually spread, right? It's remained in its place. By about after, remember they had to, at the first point when they saw that, they had to remove this condition, and they had to put the bricks in. They had to do the scraping before, they'd replace the bricks, etc., and they had to plaster it, right? So the tihara kohen, and here it says that the priest shall declare that the house is pure, kinir pahanega, because the affliction has been healed, right? So that's kind of takes us to where we are right now at this moment. And again, this whole subject of purity and impurity is, it's one that we find very arcane. We don't live our lives to any great extent, for most of us, taking these things into consideration. And yet the Bible, the Torah clearly considers it, and Jewish law, I would say, considers it an issue. Now, it's not an issue as much, and the reason it's not an issue as much is because on a practical level, what really mattered was, were you to engage in any issues involving the temple, whether it's consuming sacrifices or bringing sacrifices, or even entering the temple precinct, etc., in a state of impurity, that is taboo. Taboo. Well, we don't have a temple anymore. We do have the site of the temple. That is a fact. There is a site where the temple exists. And the truth is that there is a law that one is not supposed to go onto that temple site, because we are all on a level of impurity. Again, do people care? That's another story altogether. Right? But just if you're going to follow what the Torah is mandating, then you would not go on the temple site itself. The western wall is on the outside of the temple. I believe it was one of the supporting walls that surrounded the temple area. It's not part of the temple building itself in the sense of the sanctuary, okay? But it's one of the surrounding walls, so standing on that side of the western wall is not a problem. But going beyond that, on the other side, that is a problem, given realities now. Now, I know that for a lot of people, the issue of immortality is not one of belief. People don't really believe in it, etc. And that's a consideration. I can't prove to you that we are immortal, and I don't know that if I were capable of it, whether I'd even want to. I don't know. I do believe in it. I believe what the Torah tells me as far as this is concerned. I am a believer, and I believe that it's part of saying that the very fact that we exist, right, the very fact that we have consciousness is something remarkable. It's hard to grapple with exactly what we're talking about in terms of conscious behavior. And to say that there is something, certainly the Torah, I think, even though it doesn't necessarily say it explicitly. I am at this point fairly convinced that we are dealing with immortality here, that the Torah is trying to give us instructions on how to preserve our souls and not to sully them, etc., etc. I have mentioned this before. You know, there's at least one institute that I'm aware of in California that tries to deal with the issues of longevity and what exactly it is that curtails life, etc. And I believe that in general, to speak on a general, very general level, that the belief is that what causes us eventually to lose our lives, at least our physical lives, has to do with impurities in our system. Now, I'm sure they're talking about physical impurities that are whether they're in the atmosphere, the air we breathe, or the food that we eat, or various other things. I am also pretty much convinced that the connection between our emotions and our physical health is, without any question, very significant. And that this trying to follow, to some extent, these laws of purity that are mentioned in the Torah, in some ways, is a way to try and maintain health, both spiritually and physically. The Torah does not want to suggest that we should live our lives forever. We're not brought into this world to live forever. That is not the purpose of our creation. The question is how we use each moment in which we are conscious and capable and have some level of intelligence, etc., and use whatever talents we have. What do we do in the time that we have? At any rate, it is interesting that these issues of leprosy have to do with the physical body, they have to do with clothing, and they have to do with buildings. And of course, there are various layers of covering, right? Because leprosy involves skin, it's a covering of our bodies. We have clothing that covers that, and we have buildings that cover that. And I think that that's in terms of trying to grapple with some of one of the issues really going on here, at least that would appear to be a common theme in the various levels of leprosy and what they involve. We may have mentioned this, I don't know if we mentioned it for the record, okay, but we know that initially when they talk about when the idea of Tzara-at is brought in to begin with, the rabbis say it's an acronym for Motzi Shem Ra, which is slander, that it's a consequence of slandering. And of course, we know that part of what allows people to do things that are improper, let's even say commit sins, is a belief that somehow we really have privacy. But no one knows what's going on. And so many things are committed in terms of stuff that we would never want to have shared with either anyone beyond the family. In some cases, it has to do with the family. But the very notion that we are by ourselves and that somehow we're capable of complete privacy, not to say that in Judaism there is an important element of respecting people's space, etc., but in the belief of God, if you do in fact believe in the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, you know that nothing you have is hidden from God. And we have statements in the tradition that certainly underscore that. So again, even having a belief in God can very much underline moral behavior and decent behavior. And not believing God, I think, is showing itself in the level of narcissism that goes on these days and seems to be just gaining ground. And whether narcissism will, in fact, ultimately help humanity, I think is definitely challenged, can be challenged. In fact, I think it works just the opposite way. All right, so here we go, getting back into the main topic here. He should take in order to cleanse the house. Remember, the house has been declared pure, right? The leprosy, the symptoms of leprosy have been removed and it's been plastered over and the house is basically healed. So but it still involves a spiritual cleansing, right? And he shall take to cleanse the house, shtei tziporim, 2 birds. Why birds? Well, birds fly all over the place, and birds also chirp. And there is a sense also that if we look back at the initial explanation of Tzara-at and saying it's like slander, well, slandering someone involves using speech in an inappropriate way. In other words, human beings chirping to each other about things that they shouldn't be chirping about, right? And that possibly this is one of the reasons for taking birds. I am sure that there are many deeper and very significant reasons why birds are chosen for this particular process. But again, we are getting into elements of mysticism here that are arcane, right? So takes 2 birds, 8 areas, cedar wood, right? Now, why again cedar wood, I'm not certain, although I will tell you that cedar was used in the construction of the temple. I believe we know about cedar closets, that cedar has a nice aroma to it. I don't know. Just again, stuff to think about. Just not that. Ushni tolat. He should take, shni is red, tolat. Sorry, yeah, tolat. Tolat is a worm, and we're talking about silk, right? Because we know that silk comes from silkworms. So red silk, the azov, and hyssop. So hyssop is a kind of a moss. So we're looking at various substances, all right? Birds, living creatures. We're talking about wood. We know wood is comes from a living thing. These are all living things in a sense, right? All significant. And again, one can only imagine here what the symbolism is. I don't believe this is not part of what Rashi goes into. He doesn't deal with the mystical elements of the Torah. He wants us to basically understand the wording of the Torah, as he calls it, the pshat level, the plain and simple meaning. Very often you've been doing this enough to know that one can sort of put an exclamation point after plain and simple meaning. Does that even exist? But of course, there is at least that initial meaning that we have. And Rashi wants us not to misunderstand it because, again, the Torah is in a way written in a code that Rashi wants to be able to explain to us so that we don't misunderstand it. Right. So taking these bird, wood, silk, moss, so 4 different substances. Right? V'shachat et hatzipor ha'echad, he should take one of the birds and he should slaughter it. El kli cheres, over a vessel of clay, al mayim chayim, on, this is literally means living waters. I'm going to guess that it means flowing waters. It's not talking about, because we know that water moves, etc. So again, interesting. Of course, clay is made, it's not a living substance. It's earth, comes from the earth, and water as well, right? So just again, trying to give you some thought here. No Rashis on this here. Okay. Keep going. Right. Please excuse me. V'lakach et eitz ha'eres ve'et ha'ezov, and he should take the cedar wood, the azov is the hyssop, the shni hatolat, and the red silk, the et hatzipor hachaya, and the living bird, the taval otam bedam hatzipor hashuta, and he has to immerse them into the blood of the slaughtered bird. Well, birds don't have that much blood to them. I imagine he doesn't necessarily have to have large amounts of this of these substances, but he has to do this. Again, this is a very symbolic kind of act. And whether or not, the idea of taking things that are living and dipping them into this blood of something that is deceased. Again, what are we talking about? Are we talking about mortality, immortality, life, etc.? So, uvamayim achayim, he also should dip them in the living water, the flowing water, and he should then take the hizah al habayit sheva pamim. He has to sprinkle this over the house 7 times. So el habayit could mean towards the house. Sprinkle it towards the house 7 times. Very arcane. Vehitai et habayit, and he should purify, should cleanse the house, badam hatzipor, through the blood of the bird, v'mayim hachayim, and through this flowing water, uvetzipor hachaya. In other words, these are all the Torah is telling us. They're all part of the process of cleansing the house. Tzipor hachaya, the living bird, uve'etz ha'eres, and the cedar wood, the azov, and the hyssop, Ushni Hatovad, and the red silk. Veshilach et hatzipor hachaya, and he should send the living bird el michutz la'ir, outside of the city, el pnei hasadeh, over the open field. Look at this. He should atone. So clearly, there's something improper that has been happening regarding what caused the leprosy of the house. And the truth is, of course, people can use homes in which to do things that are immoral and wrong. And that may be another reason for our putting a mezuzah on our doorposts. Doors are essentially transition points, and putting that mezuzah up on the door is a way to remind us that God is present both outside the house and inside the house, that our public life and our private life need to be sanctified. Are these important values? I will let you conclude for yourselves. Right? You shall make atonement regarding the house, the tahir, and it shall be pure. I'm going to see if there's any Rashi here. Nope. Looks like we did all this before. So we have finished this. So just to summarize, Zot HaTorah, right? The whole negat Tzara-at, Lanake Nadek. This is the instruction. Torah essentially is related to a word that if you study Hebrew, you learn it very quickly, called moreh or morah, which means a teacher, right? Male or female. And Torah is a word that comes from that as well, and it means instruction. That's essentially what the word Torah means. Divine instruction. L'chol nega Tzara-at, for every plague of Tzara-at, v'lanatek, that's a pausal form. The word is netek, and it means a skull or a cut. In other words, some kind of injury to the skin. Tzara-at habeged. So here it's talking about bodily Tzara-at. Tzara-at habeged, and here it's talking about the Tzara-at of clothing, the labayit, and of a house. The lasait, in other words, these are manifestations of this particular condition. The lasait is a swelling, right? The lasapachat, and rashes, the baheret, and discolorations. The horot, to teach. This again is from this word moreh, right? To instruct. The yom, here it says during the day, hataneh, that which is impure, the yom hatahor, and on the day which is pure. Rashi's going to explain this in a second. We'll deal with this, right? Zot Torah Tzara-at. This is the instruction regarding Tzara-at. And as you can see, we've come to an end of a chapter, and we're at the end here after 57 verses. We've come now to the end of this discussion of Tzara-at. just finishing up the Rashi, Lahorot Bayom, to teach in the day. What exactly does that mean? So Rashi says, what it says is when it says the day, it means Eze Yom Mitaharo, on which day, right? In other words, it's telling you priest is coming, the priest is going, priest is looking at the symptoms, etc., and determining whether he is to declare it pure, the Eze Yom Mitamo, and on what day he should declare it impure. And we will stop here for today. And I welcome any comments that you may have regarding this and appreciate your presence and your sharing this with me. So, please God, we will start this next time. I will stop this year. Okay. Any thoughts? Lanny, I know you very often will, speculate and think about, give consideration to spiritual issues, and I know the way you've practiced your medicine, etc. I wondered if you have anything you'd like to add in reaction to this. Mead, I see you're unmuted, so possibly you have something to say.
No, I'm among friends here for the most part, and and
Still.
I noticed that the as I'm reading this along as you were going, the total absence of Rashi's commentary regarding the purification procedure.
Mhm.
As a practical matter, I just wonder what the rabbis of the 10th century and 9th century and 11th century were thinking about all of this stuff as it was going. Granted, in the times of development of the Talmud, there was probably a great deal more
Indeed.
significance and attempt at interpretation, but I don't know. Are there many Talmud references to this? There's really nothing in Rashi to summarize most of it.
There's an entire tractate called
Okay.
Negaim, I think is the name of the tractate, that deals with it. And of course, when you're talking about the Talmud, you're talking about a well-plowed field.
Oh yeah. No, but I think it's interesting that
yes.
in terms of Rashi commenting upon
Yes.
the Talmud, it's sort of like,
Yeah.
boy, I'm going to leave it sit.
Well,
That's all.
it's what did Rashi want to accomplish? Okay.
Yeah.
So,
He
and Lanny,
let it be.
yeah, no, I asked Lanny to comment, so I want to give him that opportunity.
All right, fine.
Say a word, and of course, any of you who want to comment, Lanny.
Yeah, I think that when you look at a lot of these, topics, you have to look at a level of creation, and it has to do again with frequency, the different frequencies, and there's a frequency in everything. And in purification, water is very, very important. And if you read about water, water has memory. It has really a sort of consciousness. If you really dive deep into it, it's much, much more than we think. The entire world relies upon water. If we had no water, we would have no life whatsoever. And I think that you have to look deeper than just the superficial level. All of these things, whether it's any living structure, has a form of a frequency or vibration, which has to do with things that many of us are not really aware of. I've come to this conclusion in a lot of things, and I think that, when God said to the Israelites that He wanted to make a kingdom of priests, that everything that was designed really was to elevate the frequency or the energy of the individual, and from food. If you look at the various different foods, and for instance, I'll give you an example with kosher compared to non-kosher. It's very expensive to keep kosher today, but however, what's the difference in the meat? There's no difference in the meat. There's a difference in the frequency, though. And I'll give you an example of that in uh, pork. Most things I can turn around to a positive frequency using the laser. I can't do that with pork. Pork has no effect whatsoever upon pork. Now, if you take sugar, sugar has a negative frequency. There are ways of turning sugar around, the laser one of them, to where it's not negative. It becomes more on the positive side. You can't do that with pork. And I think that the same thing would probably be true of uh, all of the other things that are unclean, like lobster and shrimp and so forth. Uh, they taste good. The physical component provides for sustenance, and pork is actually supposedly good meat as well as regular red meat. However, it doesn't have the same frequency. And interestingly, I came across a Bill Tiller, who I don't think most of you know, is probably one of the most intelligent physicists in our generation. He was the head of crystallography lab at in
Yeah,
California at
I've got
Stanford.
to go.
You're excused.
Yeah, I have to. We're flying back to Canton
Oh,
tomorrow. So
okay.
I've got
Welcome back.
today is packing day.
Got it.
So
Me,
I'm on a schedule. Thank
right,
you.
I understood. Of
Hope to
course, of
see you
course.
Wednesday from
Yeah.
Canton.
Okay. Well, that'll
All
be
right.
good. Just
Thanks.
safe
Bye-bye.
travels. Okay.
Yeah, so long.
Safe
Bye.
travels. Take care. Bye bye.
Bye.
Yeah. Go ahead,
And
Lanny.
anyway, he was. This was at a meeting that I was at, and he happened to be talking to two two individuals, and they happened to mention that they didn't eat pork, and these were uh, spiritual individuals who were, I think they both were psychics, and they happened to be talking to this physicist, and I happened over here, and I interrupted, and I said, I'm curious, why don't you eat pork? And both of them said it lowers our vibes. It lowered their vibes, their vibrations, which I thought was very interesting. And I remember talking to Neil Genshaft one day, and he said it's very important on how the animal is killed, because if the animal has any fear, there's increased lactic acid in the meat, okay, which causes the taste of the meat to vary. And again, I think that's a fear. All of the different emotions have a certain frequency. So all these things, they go deeper than what we take it from the surface. That's all. That's the only comment I have.
Right. No, thank you. Thank you. Again, this is arcane stuff, right? Some people are going to believe you, and some people aren't going to believe you. Just
They
like
don't.
with me too.
Right.
No question about it.
No.
So yeah.
I thought you were supposed to have animals that have cuffs and chew their blood to be kosher.
Yeah, for it to be kosher, right? They have to have split hooves and chew the cud, right? But they
Yeah.
also have to be
But no,
slaughtered a certain way as
Well,
well.
what's
So
his frequency? I can't understand that either. I mean, um,
everything is frequency. Everything, the entire
so,
world.
so let me use a different word, Harlan, and maybe in a way he's talking about the vibrations
oh,
that in which that they are actually experiencing. In other words, he's talking about something besides simply the straight physical element, but that there's a certain vibration, and they have different levels of vibration
Uh,
within all kinds of reality.
that
oh,
has.
Animals.
okay.
If Lanny, you're welcome. I mean, you're here, so if I'm misrepresenting you, you're
Oh,
welcome.
no. You're absolutely right. Everything has frequency. I mean, in music, if you ever
Right.
think
That's
about,
what he means. He doesn't mean often. That's not what he means. Okay.
yeah, yeah,
He means frequency in the sense of rate of vibration.
yeah, right.
Humans have frequency too?
Say that again.
Do humans have frequency?
Absolutely.
Everybody has it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's right.
it has the way in which and Lanny, I mean, we haven't talked about this, but my guess is that what Lanny is saying, for example, okay, is that they're healthy vibrations and they're unhealthy vibrations. And in some ways, the way in which it manifests itself in human beings is in their emotions. That if you look at the emotional health of somebody, it's very often connected to, you know, to this frequency, to the frequencies in which they're living. But it goes beyond that because Lanny, also, I believe, again, you're here, so
No,
if I'm misrepresenting you, you can correct me. It even affects your physical body as well.
very much so, more so than most people believe.
And by the way, certainly your skin. So, Lanny, you should be lapping this stuff up.
Yeah.
I think women have more emotions than men. They're more emotional.
I would not go there, Harlan. I'm recording this. I don't want you to get into trouble.
Well,
David, before you, I know you have to go, David, but did you want to add, you or Morris want to add anything before I stop the session? Did you find it interesting? I mean, that's a basic
I
question.
did. I have a question.
Yes.
okay, babe.
It
Okay.
was you were bringing up throughout today the condition of the house. I didn't hear much about the condition of the individual in the house. Everything was well. The priest would go in and he would look around for red and green mold.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
You know, but I didn't hear anything at all about what about the condition of the individual.
So that was dealt with right at the very beginning of this subject. Remember,
Yes.
we're already starting at verse 37 or something like that. So verse 1 already starts with the individual and how he's affected or she's affected by leprosy. Okay?
Mhm.
We're actually going to go back to the individual in the final chapter of Metzorah. Other levels that are, I believe, lower levels. Leprosy is a very high level of impurity. Okay? And the Torah is going to end this chapter with something that's sometimes called gonorrhea. Whether it is gonorrhea, I don't know, but it's going to talk about a flow from a person's body. Sorry, okay, and then it's also going to talk about seminal emissions and also women's periods, which will have to do with, of course, stuff that's coming from a person's body. Okay. So
Well, I can't wait. I can't wait to hear this.
Well, at least we've got what? At least another 2 days to take a look at it. Okay.
Bye-bye.
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 Boris, oops. Before you leave, did you want to say anything? Oh, can you unmute?
Kidding. No, I'm good.
Okay. All right.
I'll see you on Wednesday.
Fantastic. Okay. All right. So take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Okay, baby. Okay.